clerks whose contracts were not renewed because they are HIV positive. Well, the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria ruled that the army abused court processes by litigating the matter. Well, one of the applicants says the ruling is a resounding victory for herself and all HIV-positive members of the SANDF. In 2008, the court ruled that the South African Defence Force could not discriminate against HIV-positive members and should amend their blanket policy. Well, that policy was amended, but clearly not implemented. Well, Mark Hayward is the Executive Director of Section 27 and he joins us now from our Sea Point studios in Cape Town. Good afternoon, Mark, and thank you for your time on the PM News Desk.
Good afternoon and thank you for having me.
A resounding victory for applicants and Section 27 today, Mark. How significant a ruling is this, not only for the fight against discrimination, but also in recognizing the relationship between human rights and HIV/AIDS?
Yes, it's a very, very significant ruling. You know, basically for 20 years, Section 27, the AIDS Law Project, people who live with HIV have been arguing for their right to serve in the South African National Defence Force. The evidence has grown and grown that people with HIV can be physically fit, that they can handle the standards required by the Defence Force, but the Defence Force has continued to refuse to employ people with HIV. But today, I think the Gauteng North High Court has finally pronounced and said totally clearly that people with HIV can be in the Defence Force, they can be members of the Defence Force, and it has very strongly criticised the SANDF for the way in which, as you have reported, it has ignored a previous court order that was reached in 2008. So it's a great step forward, but I just hope that the SANDF abides by the order of the court this time rather than disobeying it.
Mark, what happens if they do not implement the new HIV policy? Will you take this back to court?
Well, I really hope that they do, first of all. You know, the President, Jacob Zuma, is the Commander-in-Chief. As we've said in a press statement this afternoon, we call on President Jacob Zuma himself to state that the SANDF will abide by this. But we don't just expect them to abide by it passively. We expect them to actively promote non-discrimination amongst people with HIV within the Defence Force, to actively communicate the judgment of the court to their members, to their officers, to make sure that there is a fulfilment of this order across the SANDF. You know, we are in touch with both of the trade unions that work in the SANDF. We are in touch with doctors in the SANDF and people who live with HIV in the SANDF. So we have eyes and ears across the Navy, the Army, the Air Force. We will be watching. But I sincerely hope that this is the end of this particular story of discrimination.
Mark, the SANDF failed to deal with evidence from a particular study on HIV regarding the life expectancy of an adult with HIV in South Africa. Can you quickly take us through the findings of that study?
Well, the SANDF has been ignoring medical evidence for about 15 years. But basically, Karishni, what we now know is that when a person with HIV is asymptomatic, they are as fit and healthy and as capable as a person who does not have HIV. And that today, in the context of antiretroviral treatment, people with HIV who are on ARVs are also equally capable of fitness and of endurance. And today, the life expectancy of a person living with HIV is just a normal life expectancy. In fact, funnily enough, there's some new research emerging showing that people living with HIV, some of them are living longer than their peers who are HIV uninfected because of the fact that they are listening to messages about healthy living, stopping smoking, part of the healthcare system, and so on and so on. So a lot of evidence has been put before the court. The SANDF chose to ignore it.
Mark, very quickly, before I let you go, President Jacob Zuma and Health Minister Aaron Motsoaledi are indeed doing some sterling work today, negotiating a price reduction in the HIV viral load testing around the world. Now, we do have the largest HIV treatment program on the globe, and we are talking about a 40% price reduction here. A significant victory in the fight against HIV/AIDS, Mark. Would you agree?
If they're successful in those negotiations, that will be a very, very significant victory. And it'll be very significant because increasingly scientists are saying that the most important way to measure whether antiretroviral treatment is working in people with HIV is to do a test called the viral load test. And that test measures the level or whether HIV virus is still detectable in the blood of a person who has HIV. That test has always been very expensive. You know, we have 2.5 million people in South Africa on antiretrovirals. Each one of them needs that test. So if they are successful, it will be another step forward in the fight against HIV in South Africa and globally.
Thank you. Mark Hayward is the Executive Director of Section 27. Moving on to other news.